Good evening. Call this meeting of the Public Safety Committee to order. On the general agenda, there are two items. We have an item considering an amendment to the city code relating to panhandlers, foot peddlers, and door-to-door solicitors. And there is an item related to the fire department fiscal year performance budget. Members of the committee, are there any items that need to be pulled for consideration? If there are none, I would entertain a motion.
Move for approval, Mr.
Second.
It's a motion and properly second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Item G1.
Consideration of amendments to chapters 34, 38, and 74 of the City Code relating to panhandlers and foot peddlers and door-to-door solicitors.
Good evening. I'm
Sykes.
Lori Sykes. Thank you. Presenting this for the City Attorney's Office. We had prepared a memo for you explaining two public safety concerns that have been brought to our attention by members of the public. The first is in connection with panhandling, which of course is begging or soliciting for alms for one's own use. And then the second has to do with another form of solicitation, which is door-to-door solicitation by companies doing business. The first recommendation is for the panhandling side. The City Council changed its ordinance in 2011 to put in place a licensing process for panhandlers. There's no fee to obtain the license, but there is an application process, an approval process, and a background check. That has been, in our consideration, very successful in that we've had more than 350 people apply for panhandler privilege licenses. Those are valid only for a year and have to be renewed. They're also subject to being revoked if there is not compliance during that year period. So because of the volume of applicants and the fact that on any given day, some of those 350 are not going to be active, we were recommending an ID badge be issued along with the panhandler's privilege license. And the idea is this ID badge would have a photograph of the person who has the license and would also very clearly display the expiration date of the license. And that way, citizens who interact with these individuals, police officers who interact with these individuals would be certain that they were currently and validly licensed with the city. And it would just be an easier way to confirm that and hopefully would further increase public comfort in their interactions with someone who is panhandling. So that would be the first recommendation.
And Ms. Sykes, if we can, members of the committee, do you want to take them both at the same time, or would you rather do it separately?
I have questions, but...
We'll pause. There's some questions about the panhandling ordinance. Councilmember Light.
How many of those 300 or whatever are reapplications? In other words, are there a lot of them, a lot of folks who get a license and then don't bother to reapply after a year? Is that what...
There are. We find there are a number of renewals with the beginning of each new fiscal year, but there are some that we never hear from again. And so we don't know if they may have moved to a different location or if they're just not interested in panhandling anymore. But we do have some that just expire with no renewal.
And what percentage of people that are checked by, say, the police department actually have a license versus those who have bothered to go about it?
I don't have the exact percentages with me, but there are only a couple of us that are authorized to review the application. And from that experience, I would say probably 90% are approved.
No, I'm sorry. I wasn't clear. If, for example, the police stop someone on a corner who's panhandling or whatever, what percentage of those people that are checked actually prove to have a license?
Oh, I see. I apologize. I don't know that personally, but I can certainly find out. We do have a number of citations that are still being issued for people who are panhandling without a license, and some who have licenses but are still panhandling in a prohibited manner, such as on the center median.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Councilmember McIntosh.
Of what benefit is the licensing process to the police department? How do they use that information? How does it help? How is it helpful to them?
It's helpful to us in, again, identifying the folks that have gone through the process have successfully completed the background check. All of this started in 2011 because of significant public safety concerns and complaints from the general public. And so this way, the police officers know when they go out, and it is very complaint driven. And so they would know that this person has been through the process and meets the requirements set by the city.
Is there an education component to getting the license? Is there any information that's given to them about what they can and can't do?
Yes, definitely. In fact, when this was first changed in 2011, we did a Channel 13 piece on it and explained that through an interview and presentation. And when the individuals come in and get their licenses, they are provided a copy of the ordinance and are given a summary of it by the Revenue Office, which handles that process.
Councilmember Burke?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask a question. I don't know how and what area you put this in, but when people have children out there fundraising and they have them in the strip all out and they're asking for money or they're letting you know you want to have the car washed, how are we addressing it? Because over in the eastern part, up on Martin Luther King and New Walkertown Road, I'm afraid some of those children are going to get hurt. They run from one corner to the next and they run across, and it's such a dangerous place. So how do we address the issue with the people who are in charge of the group?
That actually falls within the charitable solicitation ordinance, which is handled a little bit differently. For charitable groups, there's paperwork that is filed with the city secretary's office, and that is a notice of intent to solicit form, and so they advise the city of where they are going to be, when they are going to be there, and what their group is soliciting for. The restriction there is there should not be any children on the median with that group that are under the age of 14, and they also are required to have adult supervision at all times that they are on the median. If I represent the police department, if we find out that that's not being adhered to, then we will send an officer out and we'll address that situation. We have done that on occasion.
Mr. City Manager and Chairman, members of the committee, we need to do a better job because I'm afraid somebody's going to get hurt up in that corner. Because sometimes they say it's not a top priority, maybe them doing that. You know, you go back, what is that, Chief Cunningham, 1, 2, 3, 4, however you may decide you're going to address an issue. Did I say Roundtree?
You said it now.
All right, I say Chief, whoever I said. Chief Roundtree. How do we code something like that? If someone calls in and says they have these students or children doing that, how would the police department address that?
Well, depending on what relates to the operator at the time, you know, it could be, depending on what's relayed to the operator at the time when the citizen calls in. Our calls are prioritized based on code 1 through 4, actually. Code 1 being the highest, where there's a risk of death or serious injury. In a situation similar to what you are describing, it would probably be a code 2 call, where an officer would be sent out without delay to check on that to make sure that the children solicited in the street are safe.
Mr. Chairman, would it be all right, we know who they are, they're up there all the time, that we would send a friendly letter to whoever's in charge of those children, young folks? Okay. Then if they don't adhere to that, then we can take other, you know, maybe have to have a face-to-face communication with the director of that program.
And I like, we don't need to say it here, but we do know who they are. Maybe we can just get with the chief or Ms. Sykes and give a friendly amendment. I'm coming to you 1 second, Councilmember Bessie. While we're on the subject of IDs, who would be responsible for creating the ID badge, and what would the potential cost be for that ID?
The proposal would be for the City Revenue Office to handle that. They do now handle the issuance of the privileged licenses themselves, and we have been in discussion on sharing that responsibility with another division that currently does produce identification badges for certain street vendors for the city. So we're hoping, because that equipment is already there and available, and we do have that experience with it, that the upfront cost would be very minimal.
Okay. Councilmember Bessie.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to bring to the committee's attention and ask for assistance with a related issue to what we're attempting to address by these possible amendments. and that is the enforcement question. I know that Councilmember Burke asked Chief Roundtree an issue about that. One of the problems that I am told is interfering with our ability to enforce this is the apparent unwillingness of the district attorney's office to follow through when arrests are made. And I would like to ask for consideration of a letter to the district attorney's office asking that they stop what I am told is a practice of wholesale dismissals of what are being misreferred to as lifestyle violations. In fact, the arrests in the cases with which I'm familiar for panhandling law violations are very clearly public safety violations. Aggressive panhandling on private property, soliciting on those frequently very narrow and dangerous medians. I have seen at one particular trouble spot where there is repeated flagrant violation, folks who were clearly having difficulty with their balance, staggering along a median between lanes of ongoing traffic. The median is perhaps this wide. Other instances where they were sitting slouched out on that same median, and the police have been very responsive, when these have been reported, and in coming and dealing with the folks. And if they were actually not familiar with the law, it's not hardcore enforcement the first time, but some of the folks who are putting their lives at immediate risk and generating potential severe traffic accidents are repeat violators who know that even if they do get taken to the magistrate, that is going to end up being tossed because the DA's office is simply, I am told, not cooperating with treating those cases with the seriousness that they need.
Well, I believe Councilman Bessie, members of the committee, brings up a valid point. I think it would be well within order to send some correspondence to the DA or have a meeting. Just try to figure out if we can have a meeting of the minds and get on the same page. What would be the pleasure of the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval that we do that.
Okay, you're moving that we send correspondence to the district attorney. All in favor? Okay, that seems pretty unanimous. Thank you for that point, Councilman Bessie. Councilman Montgomery.
I have two comments quickly. The first one was just on the permitting thing, which was just under discussion, and the question of when those permits are issued. In general, before, and when we're looking at it, are there any areas specified there in that actual request? The area is specified.
For charitable solicitations, there are areas specified. They are to tell the city where and when they plan to engage in charitable solicitation. For the panhandlers, there is not.
Right, but specifically for the charitable one, it may help in terms of helping to police that process, even though we know some of the groups that go out and engage in that type of activity. If police are notified of the fact that these individual permits have been issued, is that something that happens now?
It does. Actually, those notices are forwarded to a particular person at the police department. They keep track of that, and I have personally gotten calls from officers confirming, is this group at the right location? And so we do monitor that. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we may, again, just have to do a better job on that altogether. Now, the second comment I make, I am against a blanket letter to the district attorney in terms of that. I was very critical when we made the changes to this policy. I don't recall if I voted in favor of it or not, but I know I was very critical of the process in which, when we first made the actual changes to the panhandling requiring the permitting process. That's just something to me that there's two sides of that process and what we look at. And so a blanket sense of what is going to come and what's going to be stated. I understand safety issues and those that permit safety hazards. That's a real issue. But for me, it's a difficult thing when we look at the individuals who are panhandling and the reason that they are panhandling, and then going and putting them into a process that they're a part of the judicial system when they did not necessarily cause any of those things that were stated, I think, are issues in terms of clear and present danger of where they are. That just to me is a slippery slope of things that I just find issue with. And even with the whole permitting process didn't set well in terms of how we look at that, but I just have an issue that just a blanket sense of saying, yes, we want you to go through all that, I have concern over that.
Well, Councilman Montgomery, I believe your comments are well and your thoughts are well taken. And with respect to them, I would say that I don't believe it's the intention of this committee to send a blanket letter. However, just sending one as a matter of public safety from this committee. But again, your comment and your points are well taken.
I was going to say,
Councilman Burke, then Councilman Bessie.
we have had, not me, but I believe Councilmember Merkel has sat with the DA about other concerns so that we could have a relationship developing when we're having something happen in the city. I don't know if we got to that part, but there was strong, you can see comments that she made about panhandling and the problems that they were having, not only her but the rest, but she did take a forward step. I thought did she ever sit with the city manager? Was that with some of the residents over there? Was that another issue?
That was a repeat offenders.
Repeat offenders when she
concerned about.
But and I don't know if we ever sent a letter or anything to see if we could get any kind of relationship going.
What we could do is we're not asking for action tonight anyway. We could bring the letter back as a draft to make sure that everybody was comfortable with the language.
I think that's fair. Councilman Montgomery, are you okay with that? We want to make sure you're all right, sir. And it was Councilman Are you finished, Councilman Burke? Councilman Bessie.
Yeah, and I understand Councilmember Montgomery's concern, and don't find it unreasonable. We don't want to give the mistaken appearance that what we're trying to do is what some cities have attempted, and that is, throw out a blanket prohibition. And as much as some of us may want to encourage the folks who are soliciting to try to help them get into real long-term helping programs as opposed to standing on the street corner. If they're standing on the sidewalk on the street corner and they're not harassing anybody and they're not creating safety hazard, I'm not talking about those guys. I'm talking about when they continue to come back to very clearly dangerous spots because of the public safety factor, or when their behavior is sufficiently aggressive toward individuals that it's a valid concern for that individual's safety. Grouping those instances in with the we don't want to go overboard reaction is what I'm concerned with seeing that we address.
Okay. What we're discussing specifically is panhandling and charitable solicitations before we move forward. Are there any more questions for Ms. Sykes and for staff on that item? Councilmember Adams, I apologize.
That's okay. Thank you. I recently got an email. I think the city manager might have gotten it in my CAL. There is a constituent that's concerned about a strong neighborhood that has a neighborhood association, been there for 20, 30, 40 years. And they adopted at their neighborhood association meeting that they have once a month that they wanted to put no solicitation signs at the entrance of their community. One of the residents in the community was against it. And after reading this, I saw what the language is. But how do we address that? I mean, the signs, everybody's got a sign. I don't know whether that'll work because of the way it looks, because this neighborhood is very good about the appearance of the neighborhood. You might have your CPI and ADT and other security, but I don't think they want to all put a sign in their yard that says no soliciting. So I would hope that this committee will look forward to some other type of solutions to this, because the residents said that basically we may be in violation of their civil rights. They want people to come to their house. I saw the time limit and everything. But in the times that we live in, this particular neighborhood, like some neighborhoods, have a residency that's, the average age is over 55, maybe even 60. So they don't necessarily, they might be retired, not home, but they don't necessarily want people coming to their houses, because what we do see, and I may be wrong, Chief, on this, in certain neighborhoods there are people soliciting, but they know people aren't home, and there's a van that follows the persons, the perpetrators that are supposedly soliciting. So they know at that point, when you don't answer the door, no cars, then probably you're not home, you know. So I have some safety concerns about that, Mr. Chair.
I think that's a good point. I don't know if we'll be able to solve that, but maybe we can
Yeah.
continue to keep some ideas out front and try to move forward on that issue. It's a good point. Councilman Blight.
And certainly, I think Ms. Sykes' next part will address part of your question. And I would think that our lawyers here could probably tell you that to totally ban soliciting with signs in the neighborhood and everything is probably a civil rights problem. So I don't know. I know some towns have been sued by the ACLU for doing that. So
We do have to take a look at how do we protect communities. I'm thinking of a community in particular that I'll have a meeting with on Thursday. They've had such a large, amount of break-ins that we've got to find a way to do both. Or maybe we'll get some answers from Ms. Sykes. If we can move to foot peddlers and door-to-door solicitors, please.
Thank you. This is the second recommendation, and this is again based on numerous complaints that both the City Attorney's Office and the Police Department have received about persons going door to door, and this is commercial solicitation. So this means that they are going door to door trying to sell products or trying to sell services. So this would be something different than asking for charitable contributions or coming to speak about religious matters. So in looking at this issue, we saw that the city had not updated its foot peddler ordinances in some time. And as you see, that this amendment would affect some different chapters, because Chapter 74 deals with foot peddlers, Chapter 34 deals with licenses and regulations for foot peddlers, and Chapter 38 includes some offenses that you could engage in as a foot peddler. So the idea was to consolidate those regulations in one ordinance that would affect door-to-door solicitation, commercial, and then non-commercial to the extent of, again, if you'd rather not have anyone come to the door, then that would be your choice as a citizen. Another recommendation, which you'll see, is to reduce the time period. Currently, it's 9 p.m. at night, and that has caused a lot of discomfort with citizens. They feel that is too late for someone to be approaching their doorway. So the recommendation is to change that to the period of sunset. And that is what we use with the panhandler's license, that panhandling is to stop within a half hour after sunset. And so that is also incorporated into this recommendation. The draft ordinance that you were provided is just a starting point for discussion. It was taking into account some examples of ordinances from across the country that address this issue. And as you can see, it has a licensing process similar to the panhandler privilege license, in that you would come in, submit an application, you would be deemed eligible or ineligible based on the information you provide, and then the license would be issued. Along with it, again, would be a photograph ID that would have to be displayed at all times that you're engaging in solicitation. And then if the citizen indicated by a sign that they did not want anyone to approach their doorway, then that would be prohibited. And that signage could be in effect both for commercial and non-commercial solicitation. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the draft ordinance. We are still looking at some issues in it. We are still researching some of the provisions, but again, wanted to have a starting point. The final item that's noted in the memorandum is that we have had one citizen specifically request that the city consider a do not solicit registry. That was described as being like a do not call list that you could add your name to for telemarketers. We have talked to a couple of jurisdictions, one in Fort Collins, Colorado, and Nashville, Tennessee, that has enacted such a registry. And we've gotten information from them on the effectiveness of it, how it's administered, and cost information. So again, that is included in the memo as a specific request. for consideration by a citizen who contacted the city attorney's office.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, Mrs. Sykes. Councilmember Adams, I think that actually addresses your point. Individual neighbors would have the ability under this proposed ordinance to have a do not solicit registry, which, you know, if you want people knocking on your doors and asking, that's fine. If you don't want it, fine. But this may be one way to take a look at that. I've got one question before I come to you, Councilmember Light. Half hour after sunset. You know, in the summer months, it gets dark around 9 o'clock. In the winter months, it gets dark a lot earlier. I think that whether it's sunlight or not, 9 o'clock is just way too late to be coming to a house. So, you know, as we start framing the context of the conversation, I'd just like for those at the table to begin to think about that. Councilmember Light.
What did you find out about the cost of having a do not solicit registry, do not knock, whatever?
The jurisdictions that I was able to speak with a representative personally said the cost dollar-wise was fairly minimal. They had taken quite a bit of time to set the system up before they went live with it. And so it is completely online in both of those jurisdictions, Fort Collins, Colorado, and Nashville, Tennessee. And so by having it be an online registry, both for citizens to use and for the solicitors to look at and familiarize themselves with, it cut down on the dollar-wise expense. They did say administratively, it did take some time to put together, and of course, some division of the government has to be assigned to oversee it and administer it.
Thank you.
I'll go with Councilmember Burke, then I'll come to you, Councilmember McIntosh.
Yes. When we talk about solicitation, I believe Councilmember Adams talked about neighborhoods where you have older citizens. These people want to become aggressive. And some older citizens are not like me. I don't allow their dogs in my yard or their cats in my neighborhood. I know y'all like animals, Mrs. Stanley. And they'll say, get out of Miss Burke's yard. You know she does not. That's my neighborhood has been a very nice neighborhood, but we're having people moving in who may not like what Miss Burke will say. And there are some people who come to solicit in my neighborhood. I don't allow them on my porch. I just merely tell them, off the porch. But everybody's not going to act that way. And when you get older, you become very sensitive and a little intimidated by things. People say that ordinarily you would not even pay attention. And I don't know what we're going to do with solicitation, but we need to be doing something in these neighborhoods to let folks know they are also infringing on the rights of the people in the neighborhood.
That's a good point. Councilman McIntosh.
Just having knocked on 3,000 doors here in the last little bit, I do think it's important, though, that we continue to allow people running for public office to have access to people face-to-face. It's very difficult to contact people. It's very difficult to get across anything more than a 30-second soundbite. And I had some very, very good conversations at people's doorsteps, and people were surprisingly engaged. So I think we need to just be careful that we don't limit that too much.
Good point. Would that fall under the concept of solicitation, though?
It's a non-commercial.
On page 2 of the draft ordinance, under the definition of solicitation, non-commercial solicitation, we do carve out of this any political activity, any religious contact on behalf of a religious organization. We also, again, in a draft for consideration, would carve out of that students who are engaged in approved fundraisers for their schools. So we did try to take into account some of the activity that would not possibly be unwelcome.
Okay. Councilman McIntosh, are you finished?
Done. Thanks.
We'll just go around this way. Councilman Montgomery.
Well, that was part of my question, and I was going to ask, so I'm glad that was that was already cleared. The other part of that, which was just mentioned, how do you go about deciphering what is an approved fundraiser for a school? You know, I might go in my house and type up a fundraiser and go get some Snicker bars, and you know, is that, you know, that's approved by me, but that's not approved by a school.
Right, and some of the jurisdictions we looked at included that distinction and some didn't. And we could certainly follow up on that and see how the school system designates approved fundraisers, if there is some sort of flyer or something that would be there on hand with the student. There were a couple of jurisdictions that required the parents to be with the student. So again, that would be something to discuss and evaluate.
May I just an addendum to that?
Please.
What about other not-for-profit organizations? I don't think I've ever been approached at my door, but where would they fall?
They would be considered non-commercial solicitation.
Okay.
And so the only things that would apply to charitable organizations under this proposed ordinance would be that if you have a sign saying, I don't want anybody to solicit no matter what, and then prohibited activities, which would be that aggressive behavior, that refusing to leave after the person asks you to leave. The charitable groups would be subject to that also, but not the registration and the licensing provisions.
Thank you.
Is there a follow-up to your question?
Yeah, I wasn't finished.
Okay, please do so.
And that was actually the last part that I was going to, in terms of those quote-unquote charitable organizations that are kind of pulled down and exempt. And one thing that right there in terms of Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts and these organizations, how do we set the standard that these organizations are different from another nonprofit organization? How do we set that standard for who is and who isn't?
The way that this draft is set out would be any nonprofit organization would be considered non-commercial solicitation. Again, they would still have to go by the city regulations for filing a notice of intent so that the city knows they're going to be out there. But they would not have to go through this licensing process.
Councilmember Bessie.
Yeah, I was originally going to point out what was just elaborated on, that the only prohibition other than sort of aggressive actions that would apply to the non-commercials, including political and charitable, was if you've got a no solicitation posted. It occurred to me that there are going to be some households that would like to be able to post a no commercial solicitation prohibition, that wouldn't want to keep the Girl Scout cookies away from their door, for example. Right. And we might consider whether it would be appropriate to include an option to post no commercial solicitation that would apply to everybody that had to get the license and the registration. Just a thought.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
In
Vice
some
Chair.
cases, when the scouts, were you there?
No, you the vice chair. You go ahead. We'll Councilmember Adams speak next.
I don't count. Go ahead.
She counts. I keep calling her name because she counts.
Thank you, sir. For scouts, they used to send us a note telling you that they're going to put the food at the door. Would that be I don't want it to be in violation. Is that okay?
That would be okay.
Okay.
Yes.
They
Yes,
let
sir.
us know in advance.
All right, Councilman, you speak as long as you want, Councilmember Adams.
His committee, he can have it.
You ladies first. You may speak as long
Thank
as you
you.
want. Yes, ma'am.
I noticed in your report that you had the part about apartments, condos, density housing. I noticed over the years, mostly all apartments have out front, or condos, no soliciting, but I see that you've changed it here to some degree, so you might want to let the committee know that that's changed, in that you're saying that they have to have it at every entranceway, but in the past, they would tell even a politician, you can't do anything in this apartment because I got a no soliciting sign out here. So how does that go? I read it, but if you could explain it. Is it still basically the same? They get to post one sign, and they get to say, nobody can come in here and solicit at all. And if they can, then that's no different than my neighborhood saying, we want to post a sign, and nobody can come in here and do soliciting. So we need to be straight, City Manager.
And I think it may, I'm sorry, it may depend on, when you sign your lease or when you join a homeowners association, there may be specific provisions in there that you agree to. I mean, that's certainly something that we can look at. You may give up, legally could give up some of your rights to object to that when you sign your lease or when you join, but that would be a possibility.
It's an option.
And Mr. Chair, I think we need to look at that, because a lot of, in certain neighborhoods, the residents that live in density housing are citizens that need the exposure to their political rights, and I'm being a politician right now, but education is key for them to understand the issues that impact their quality of life, and every one of us understand that. But if I am not allowed access to even give them a card or a piece of paper or something, then I think, in my opinion, that's a violation of civil rights, of being able to understand the laws and the Constitution of the United States as to what's my rights. If an owner of an apartment can tell me, you can't leave any information, you can't come on this property dispensing voter information, political information, then to me that's no different than a person living in a neighborhood that says, now we differentiate who can and who can't based on something. I just think we need to be very clear as to how we go with that, city attorney, city manager, because I think it's wrong. If we're going to allow solicitors to come into neighborhoods, and people have told us they don't want them there, but they can come if they got a license, then I believe that that needs to be appropriate for all places of dwelling that's considered housing. We just need housing, because it's not fair. I don't think it's fair.
And I imagine that this item will stay in committee just for information. Attorney Sykes, if you would maybe bring us back something that addresses that concern.
Yes,
I saw a couple of more hands, and we want to try to move forward as efficiently as possible. Councilmember Montgomery Bessie. But there are two items on the table that I don't believe we discussed for information. One of it being including an option for non-commercial solicitation. Are we okay with asking staff to go back and tweak the language and bring that back?
Yes.
Secondly, something that I brought up about having a system of half hour after sunset. Can't read my own writing sometimes.
The time.
Are we okay with half hour after before sunset, or do we want to tweak the time? What say you? I saw Councilmember Light, then Councilmember Bessie.
I guess I would say, did it really say 6 a.m.? No, 9 to, let's just call it 9 to 5 or something like that.
So, well, one option on the table. There's one way to think about it. One option on the table is 9 to 5. Councilmember Bessie, we'll come to you, sir.
An alternate suggestion. It currently reads 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. You might say 9 a.m. to either 9 p.m. or 8 p.m. or half an hour after sunset, whichever comes first that day. And I'd suggest something later than 5, because if you're going to let people knock on doors on weekday evenings in times of the year when it's light, then you need to make it a little later than 5. For all practical matters, that's when you can catch people at home. Speaking as someone who has also knocked on more than 3,000 doors in a given campaign, I always turn away if I see a sign that says no soliciting. I just assume they don't want to see it. But if there's not a sign there and it's light and it's before 8 o'clock in the evening, then I think of that as legitimate time, and until and unless they say go away, I don't want to hear from you. I can tell you some stories about that.
Members of the committee?
I was going to ask about this gated neighborhoods where they have no soliciting. I know a lady who was supporting me, and she was very upset because she couldn't put one of my signs. But she said, and I didn't know she was trying to do that. But then she said, I got real upset. And she said, but it's against our rules. So she said she should have read it. She didn't know it. She bought the house out there, and she signed. So I think if you could get an example of that, and then also see what Councilman Adams about these overall dense neighborhoods, what do they actually have in there? A lot of people go in and don't even realize what they're signing, their lease agreements.
And there appear to be two items on the table. We're looking at 9 to 5 p.m., and then we're looking at 9 to 8 p.m. potentially, or half hour before sunset. We've heard from Councilmember Bessie, Councilmember Light.
Well, I'm going back to, Mr. Chairman, I'm going back to the question about being able to put your political sign or to go into places that say that you can't. I'm sorry, but I told my niece, who was told by her residents association that she couldn't put my campaign sign in her yard. I said, "Oh, baby, I don't want to get you in trouble with your your brand new neighborhood, but if they allow commercial signs like for sale
Or for rent.
by so and so, they have to allow my political sign." So, that's certainly something that needs to be taken into
Yes.
consideration when we're talking about this.
But there's no saying in football that urges the ref to call it both ways. So maybe when you bring it back, we can look at how the ref can call it both ways,
Yes,
Attorney
sir.
Sykes. Councilmember Bessie.
Yeah, just one possible distinction. If a neighborhood with public streets and sidewalks wants to post a sign at the entrance to that neighborhood, no soliciting, I think it should be null and void.
Yeah.
However, if you've got an apartment complex or a condo complex that has only private streets and sidewalks in it, and has shared property outside the actual, condo you own or apartment you rent, wants to post at the entrances, I think that's reasonable because that's a private property question.
I think that's an excellent way to look at it.
When we have gotten those questions in the past, we have
Yeah.
responded in that way.
We've got some good conversation on the table. Now, we've got a little bit of time. Do you want to be heard, Councilor Adams? Oh, I apologize. Councilman Montgomery, then Councilor Adams.
It's just in terms, I know we're having a conversation on timing. And one thing I would say in terms of you're looking at sunset and that time, it's that can be a little iffy. Because if you say today, I just looked and to see what time. Today sunset was 5:57. So if I say it was 5:56 and they said it was 5:57, that seems, and tomorrow is not going to be 5:57. So it is, I would rather a certain time specific that's not set on, the sunset per se, but to really get in stone an actual time. I'm not recommending a specific one, but just to get a concrete time that we would say would be the cutoff would be a better solution.
I'm coming to you, Councilman Baker. I'm kind of meticulous about, we've got two different items on the table, and we're talking all around them. So can we get one nailed down and then move forward? Yes, sir.
To the timing issue, is there any sense that the community is upset more about an 8 o'clock knock on the door versus a 7 o'clock knock on the door versus a 6 o'clock? I mean, to me, 8 o'clock seems awful late still. 7 o'clock seems like it's reasonable. But is there, that's just me thinking, is there any sense from complaints that we've gotten, is there a natural cutoff?
The majority of the complaints are after dark. And that's the way the citizen will word it, is I'm not comfortable with people coming up to my door after dark. And so that was where we were thinking of the sunset provision. I can tell you from the enforcement side with police and panhandlers, we have the same sunset provision. If it's anywhere close, then they're not going to issue a citation. They're going to talk to the person and explain the rule to them. But you're right, that can be a little bit gray.
I think we all agree that the sunset provision could cause a little bit of trouble. We've got a 9 to 8 from Councilman Bobessi. We've got a 9 to 5 from Councilman Blight, and then we've got a 9 to 7, maybe potential compromise from Councilman McIntosh. Let's nail it down. What is the pleasure of the committee and those who are at the table? And then I'll come to you, Councilman Bobessi, unless you want to speak about the time issue.
That was actually.
Please do.
In terms of how I have been received in various campaigns, there's a bright line and there's a gradual transition. The bright line is if it's after dark, they don't want to see it. And so when it gets dark, I stop. It doesn't matter when it is. But the gradual transition is between 7 and 8. I have year after year consistently, if it's before 7 and there's not a sign that says no soliciting and it's not close to dark, they may not want to talk with me, but they're not going to complain. As it gets closer, as it goes past 7:30, then the number of go-aways swings up. So if you're looking for an hour certain, I'd say 7 is as close as you're going to get. But I really would retain an after dark provision, because if you're talking about the winter time when it gets dark at 5:30, I don't think people should have to put up with strangers knocking at their door after dark if they don't want to.
Pleasure of the committee. In the interest of time, let's move forward on this one. Or do we want to think about it and have staff bring us back to potential options?
Do you want a motion?
Or a motion on the time?
Uh-huh.
We've got one item to wrap up here. So you make a motion on the time, that'll be fine.
Okay. I would say that we use from 9 to 7 or till dark, whichever comes first.
Motion, 9 to 7, or into dark, whichever comes first. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I'm just going to abstain while the folks think about it.
Okay.
Well, we're thinking about it, potentially there. The last thing to wrap up, and we'll move forward, is the idea about using public right-of-ways or public sidewalks and streets as a deterrent or an invitation to solicit. How do we want to move forward? Well, was I not clear, Madam City Attorney? I think Councilmember Bessie made a comment that if a complex or a group of houses has city sidewalks or city streets, then it seems reasonable that a person should be able to come in and solicit or campaign there. And if there were maybe private property, then there was the understanding that, well, we understand if we were not able to do so. Hopefully I've accurately captured.
If I may, the concept that I was suggesting was, if you've got private streets and sidewalks, not public property, then to me a sign at the entrances to the complex would suffice. If, on the other hand, those are public streets and sidewalks owned and maintained by the city, then it ought to be left up to the individual residents to either post or not as they choose. That would be my suggestion.
Councilmember Mack.
I was going to say, that's how we handle it now. If you want us to put that in the draft ordinance, we can, but that's how we handle the situation now.
Okay, let's wait to hear the pleasure to make.
My question was something that Ms. Adams brought up earlier, is that are you going to say that a property manager group or a property owner could keep politicians or religious groups off of their property and away from the doors of their tenants? If you've got a couple hundred unit complex and you've got an owner, a single person, who says, I don't want my people to be exposed to whatever message might come their way, that doesn't seem like a very workable scenario.
And I think that's a reasonable judgment call. That's a policy matter. If you, what I do if I'm campaigning is, if it's a private street only, for an apartment complex or a condo complex, if it's got a no soliciting at the entrance, I don't go in, just as a matter of judgment discretion. But I think that there is a reasonable public policy argument being made, as Councilmember Adams has, that there's a countervailing interest on behalf of the residents if it's a First Amendment kind of question, and that's something that the committee has to weigh.
Yes.
Councilmember Burke.
I didn't go into any of the public housing campaigning. I just put my name out. I don't have to do that. But I was accused of going into the public housing campaign and with a certain person, and the person, oh no, not Miss Burke. She wasn't with me, and I was there for a reason. And so I talked with another person who'd been campaigning hard in the area, and that person said, oh yeah, we were in there. So this is what I said to him. I said, if we allow people to say who can go into public housing or into apartment units, that they would not have the right, I think they all have a right to hear what a candidate has to say. And I said, that's one right that I don't think would be right for us to do, to say to them, you can't come in here because of the control they have over the person. Now, that right, I couldn't go along with. I think they ought to be able to go in. I don't know about the time, but they ought to be able to go in and talk to people.
And what I've heard, Attorney Sykes and Attorney Common, that is currently how it's done, but we're looking to add some language into the draft in order to have it on paper.
And I can certainly research the issue of, if you assume there's no signage, what are the respective rights of a commercial complex and the citizens? I'd be happy to look at that and see what I can find on that.
If you'll bring that back to us, hopefully there are no questions or concerns, and we'll move forward with the next item. Thank you, Attorney Sykes.
Thank you.
Item G2.
Winston-Salem Fire Department fiscal year 2012-2013 performance report.
Giving the performance report is our own Fire Chief, Chief Farmer. Thank you for being with us today, and Chief, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say good evening to the committee, Chair, Mayor Pro Tem, committee members, and management. Before I get started tonight, I have staff with me. I'd like to introduce them to you. Some of them, these people are new, so I want you to know who they are, who's working for you today. Staff, please stand up and come and introduce yourself, please. Everybody knows Robert Owens. He's been here and is a figurehead in our city, but we have 3 new members today, and I'd like for them to come up and introduce themselves.
And at least tell what they do, so no.
And there's a request to tell us what you do as well when you introduce yourself, please.
Yes, sir. Good evening. My name is Tad Byram. I'm Assistant Chief, and my job is over the Logistics Division, which means I'm responsible for the apparatus, for the fire engines, the fire stations, equipment, and supplies.
Thank you, Mr. Byram. Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Right.
Good afternoon. My name is Harry Brown. I'm Assistant Chief over Operations. And basically what I do, I handle all the complaints and good and bad comes from personnel out the street, the actual stations.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. It's good to meet you as well. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Sabrina Stowe. I'm a senior community educator with the fire department, and my job is to keep people educated about fire safety, life safety hazards, with the assistance of the fire department. I will be going out into the community, getting this message out to keep people safe.
Thank you, Ms. Stowe. It's good to meet you also. Chief Farmer.
May I just say this?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Education. When we had our City of Winston-Salem Fire Department was complimented for having one of the stronger education components, and they were used around the country when they developed an educational plan that this school system used, and then the other ones picked it up. So we hope to hear some very interesting things. As I said earlier to the city manager, when we hire people, we would expect for them to bring us, and as the other council person said, up a little higher. Share your ideas. Be creative.
I'd just like to also highlight, I'm very excited about this staff. They show a vigor that we just have not seen in the department for quite a while. They're already working together well. They're bringing in new innovation already, and we expect you will see some results from them very, very quickly. Ms. Stowe was already talking about more activity in the communities, meaning door to door, all those kinds of things that help people get a direct contact with fire people so they can become more aware. So we're excited about that, and we hope to see the results of their actions and work in the very near future. Briefly tonight, we're going to be talking about our annual performance report. We have a few slides, but we will be quick. And I would also, I know you have looked at the report, so if there are any questions, staff is here tonight to support answering any questions you might have regarding the report. Obviously, our department has a mission to provide efficient fire and rescue and medical services to our city. And we do that with a mindset focused on integrity, equity, and accountability. And we believe in maintaining innovation in our department so that we can maintain a leading edge type of environment. Certainly, the first area, Chief Brown mentions he's over suppression. That is the bulk of the people that you see, the people that are on the fire rigs, the people that are responding to the calls. In our city, the fire suppression people are actually sort of different. They handle the response. They also do code enforcement. They also do a lot of the education programs. So those folks are the workhorses of the department, and we do that sort of better than most departments. Our efficiency committees have noted that we do that very well, and we get a lot of work done for the amount of people that we have. So when you look at suppression, these are the objectives and the goals that we look forward to trying to meet every year. And certainly in any fire organization, you're going to talk about response times. We still focus on driving to the scene within a 4-minute response time. We don't do that as well as we used to, but we still have a lot of success. We do that on an average of around 65% of the time. And certainly every area in our city has places we cannot literally drive to in 4 minutes, but we still do a great job with that. And you will see more coming from the department as we work on standards of cover in really fine-tuning what that real response time is for our entire city. But this is how we've done on response time throughout the fiscal year of 12-13. Certainly when you look at this stat right here, you simply see where the call volume is, where the bulk of the calls are. If you look at the first column, you see our fires, around 812 fires, 300 or more, about 321 of those fires are actually structural fires. So you look at a structural fire occurring almost every day in our city, and those structure fires can involve up to five companies on a regular basis, and of course on larger fires you have many more people that may need to be brought into the scene to make sure we can handle the fire. As you can see, the medical call is the largest volume of call that we have within our city, and during this fiscal year we responded to over 19,000 calls. And certainly we noted that in our reduction program we hope to reduce that by up to 40%. And the rest of the calls are calls that occur and also take a lot of work effort from our people and use up our resources also.
Mr. Chairman, may I say something about this one?
Please do.
These medical calls, that's something that we started new. I don't mean medical as such, but how many times we'll go out and we had some new guidelines, and I think we need to keep us posted on how they're working. That was presented to us last year, I believe.
Yes, ma'am.
Earlier.
We have had one report, and I think we're going to be presenting our second quarter results during next month's public safety meeting also.
But it's still working like you said from the beginning.
Yes, ma'am. We're up to 40%, and during next month we'll report on what's happening and then give you a real idea of what's happening and where that stands as we are right now.
Thank you, Chief.
Fire prevention, every department, and certainly Winston-Salem's department, focuses on reduction. We noted that we had 812 or so fires last year. That number years ago was probably closer to 1,500. 3 or 4 years ago it was around 900. So we're always working to reduce fires. And so prevention is a big component of what we do. And Chief Owens oversees all of the fire prevention, whether it's a component of life safety or simple reduction of fires or code enforcement. So everything that we do in the line of code enforcement falls under him and is very important to our department. And I think it's noteworthy to see that in this slide you see that our percentages, we pretty much meet our inspection and code enforcement every year. We have a 100% objective, and we reach that in the high 90s. Typically when you don't see 100% is because sometimes violations cross over into the year, because if we do an inspection in, say, June of the year, we might not finish that inspection in terms of closing it out into the next year. Sometimes it's difficult to find those owners you were talking about earlier. If they're out of state, out of town, if we can't find them, it takes a little longer to close them out. But a huge portion of those inspections are conducted and are successful a year. It's also important to note that firefighters also use this as a benchmark for target hazards, so they can see what's happening in these businesses, so that when we respond, we can develop response plans so that we can deal with an emergency upon arrival. Fire logistics, certainly, Chief Tad has a huge job, because not only tied up into the department services is equipment, but safety and using that equipment properly is very important. So these are the things that you see that happened this year. We Logistics built a new fire station in league with capital projects and property maintenance. We also added a pump test pit, which has already decreased mileage and added a huge margin of efficiency to the fire department shop. We purchased a new fire pumper, which is simply a fire truck, and we also added a new command vehicle. The team continues to work with radios and turnout gear to meet the current NFPA requirements that are occurring on a day-to-day basis. And obviously this is our station at 4430 Glen High Road, Station 19, and the newest fire truck added to your city's fleet. Our hazardous materials team, in our city/county, there's a joint effort to deliver hazardous materials services. Certainly the department houses the hazmat team at Station 17, and the backup team is at Station 12. And these folks respond to calls inside the city and the county on a regular basis. And something's going on with our slides. Okay, sorry about that. So you can see that we don't have a lot of hazmat calls throughout the year, and that's a good thing. When you're talking about the release of products, chlorine and gases and substances that are dangerous to the environment and the people, it's fortunate we don't have a lot of these, but it is very important that when we do have them, that the hazmat team are able to get there to recon and find out what activity is actually, what has occurred and what's caused the spill, and then quickly come up with a way to mitigate that incident. Now, our hazmat team they're not cleanup people. They are knowledgeable about the cleanup that takes place, but in league with the emergency management, we often get people there to help clean up incidents and make sure we get the environment back to the position of being normal. So hazmat team is a key function. Again, it's county, city supported, and they do a great job at making sure hazmat occurs successfully every year. And we just wanted you to see some of the significant responses that we had during the year. And I won't go through each of those, but you can see when we start talking about targets and hazards in our city, certainly a residential call at a house in lieu of a fire might be a small target hazard because you just have one family, one home. But certainly to that family, that's a huge hazard. You know, if my house or your house catches on fire, it's huge to us. But the loss value is less significant in the total scheme. But when you start having apartment fires in businesses, that changes completely. A single apartment fire can involve up to 100 residents, as we saw back in Alders Point. And so you can see that here are some significant fires that we had at apartments. And most of those apartments, we were able to get there early enough to save the apartments, and we had very few injuries. When the cascade of events happens at best, meaning when the people discover the fire early, they call us, and the communication operators are able to get that information to the folk, and we can drive there in 4 minutes or less. We have a high probability of saving people, not losing anyone or not injuring anyone in the fire if we can intervene early. So these are just the stats of some of the worst case fires we've had. Brownsboro Road, obviously you see repeated, and we've had a few fires there, and the Prevention Bureau and fire staff and suppression has done a great job in going back to those communities and doing programs sort of to help teach them and make them more aware so that they can prevent that from occurring again. Of course, you see here there were some explosions. The one you see that looks like a manufacturing plant was an explosion that occurred, and of course the one on the right is a residential explosion. Both of those explosions, one of them had a person that was injured, but fire was able to arrive and keep the fire contained to the house. And on the left side, they were able to go there and put the fire out and actually save the business so they could get back into service. So in terms of economic risk, we kept the business. And in terms of hazards on the right, you see that the fire did not spread to the adjacent property. So that's very important in fire. And of course, this is another apartment fire, and I know this is a dark picture, but you can see the front of that building didn't look like it sustained a lot of damage, but on the right side there was significant damage. But that fire, we were able to save half of the property, so they were able to restore that set of apartments and get those people back into the apartments at some future time. And of course, this is what happens when you have an apartment fire, when the cascade of events goes almost perfect. The people find out early, they call us early, we get the communication early from the comm center, and our folks respond quickly, and you can get there, and you can't even tell a fire occurred there because they were able to get in, confine the fire to the room or rooms of origin, and basically limit it to one, as they did in this fire, limit it to one apartment. And once all that was straightened out, most of the people still could retain their lifestyles in those apartments. So again, just wanted to let you see some of the work that goes on in lieu of what firefighters do. In terms of significant findings from our report, we still see that kitchen fires are the leading fire causes in our community. Our response times in our east wards and southeast wards in Stations 19's territory actually improved, and naturally that was due to the new station being built out there and occupied. Response times in the west ward and the southwest wards, engine 15, 18 areas, we have long responses out there. As our city has grown, the mileage has increased, so we're continuing to work on solutions to provide better protection out in that area. Our community are completely aware of smoke detectors. However, the code or the challenge for smoke detectors has changed. In the old days or years ago, we advocated having one detector in the hallway in the bedroom area. That never made sense to me anyway, because it's like if you close the doors, the fire was supposed to happen, out in the hallway. But now the code is saying you should have a smoke detector in each bedroom and certainly in the living areas, so that people can be alerted so they can get out of the house. So we're getting that message out more, and prevention actually went into East On development a few months ago and started that door-to-door campaign to sort of help people become more and more aware of that. And Ms. Stowe has already indicated that we need to do much more of that. Even though she's new, she's already telling us what to do, which is a good thing. And so we're excited about that, and you will see more and more of that in your communities. Our medical call volume continues to increase, and again, we are still, as you have noted earlier, working on reduction there. And we also conducted 194 fire investigations there, and 138 were incendiary fires, but we were excited because we had a high solve rate there, 25%, and that rate exceeds the national average, and we're really excited about the ability of our Fire Prevention Bureau in league with police detectives, their ability to go out and solve the significant crime that might occur in lieu of arson. Key accomplishments, we hired 14 new firefighters, and they all completed the recruit class and became firefighters. We had a rescue certification review, which simply helped us to look at our capability and make sure we had our people trained, and we had the equipment and the know-how to deliver rescue services. The grant was complete, and we were successful in building Station 19. We also took some grant money to purchase some equipment last year, which really saved us a lot, turnout gear and other equipment that we really needed. And also we conducted a community risk assessment. So that's just a brief highlight on what we did and what the report entails. Do you have any questions at this point in time?
Chief, I think that was a fine report. Is there anybody around the table who has questions? Councilman Light.
It's not a question. I truly didn't know until a week or so ago when we had our meeting about the stovetop suppressors.
Yes, ma'am.
An inexpensive solution to 50% of the fires that we have. So I'm very intrigued by that, especially as someone who tends to forget the food on the stove.
Yes, ma'am. We started a campaign in the fall of 12, I believe, 11 rather, in terms of a press conference and letting the community know. Chief Owens and his staff actually have received a grant and have installed some in some apartments. Rob, you want to have a few comments about that?
Good evening.
Good evening.
We were successful at getting a grant that we worked with the Housing Authority, and we actually provided these devices to all the Housing Authority units, the high-rise units, and some other units that they have, and had those installed. I think in the future that we're going to be coming to you all with some things to talk about this. They are a very inexpensive way to solve a major problem that we have here, and it's across the United States. Cooking fires is the #1 type of fire that we respond to, and it's really something that can so easily be resolved.
Councilmember Bessie?
Yeah, the structure fire yesterday, Cliffdale, that was a stove fire, as I recall. I had a question. I love maps, so I've been looking at the maps in the report. They all seem to be tritone, and I wonder if you could tell us what the 3 colors are indicating. For example, A18 in the report, you've got a tan, a medium brown, and a yellow.
Give us the page number, Councilman Bessie.
It's 78 in our package.
Yeah, each fire station, we call it a territory, and there are 3 shifts, and each shift has a certain geographical area that they're covering. So they're responsible for awareness in those areas. They're responsible for conducting the inspections and the workload in those areas. So those colors represent the breakout of the workload in each fire station or fire territory.
For the non-emergency response, then.
For the territory period.
But you know, are you talking about hourly shifts?
Yes, sir. Well, day shifts. Each shift is 24 hours,
right. And
shift A will have a certain amount of the territory that they're responsible for. Shift B and shift C.
But it's just for whoever's on duty has to respond to the emergency calls in the whole territory.
Right.
It's just they do the inspections, and the outreach is divided into three groups.
So a shift in this case is a 24-hour shift.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so those three colors are the territories for what that particular 24-hour shift, the area they handle in terms of the inspections.
And yes, sir, in terms of non-suppression activities. Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Burke.
Oh, yes, I was just going to say thanks for your report. It's nice to have someone who is still excited about what they do, and to bring your team together to present us a very good report, and I wish them the very best. One thing I can say, we have put a lot of, and it's no problem, in the real estate. We have some very fine facilities where people spend a lot of time, and that they look always attractive, and that's good. And Mr. City Manager, I would say if there's anything to upgrade some of them, you know, we have some of the newer ones just as modern as it can be, but if we have any that we need to upgrade, let us please do that.
You will see some information with the capital needs assessment on 3 stations.
Any more questions or concerns for Chief? Chief, we want to thank you for bringing this particular presentation to our committee. Thanks to all the fire staff who came along. As Councilmember Bessie mentioned, you know, there are some tough fires that have been fought recently. So we thank you for all of your work on every fire. And I would be remiss not to mention, you know, the fire that occurred at the R.J. Reynolds building downtown, which was contained by the department. So, you know, as a citizen and as a member of the council in this community, we thank you for what you do, all of you. And we appreciate you helping our city, as I always say, to be a better place to live, work, and relax.
And we appreciate the support from the Public Safety Committee and all of our council people and management. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Is there any other information, items, conversation for the good of the order? If not, we'll consider this meeting to be adjourned.